Okay, so welcome everybody. I imagine we'll have a few more people trickle in. There's a lot of demand for our OPIS training this fall. Normally, maybe 5 or 6 people sign up. We offer this training every year, have for some time now. I think over a decade anyway. But we did our Astro EduNC, 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 EDUNC. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but we had this meeting earlier this summer. How many of you, I see some people, how many of you made it to the meeting? Couple of you, yeah. It was a good, it was a lot of work. It was a crazy amount of work. We had like 100 educators show up, and I had a staff of, we had on the scientific organizing committee, you had enough people, but the local organizing committee, I had like 3 people. So it was a crazy amount of work for like 3 people. But got to meet a lot of new people and reconnect with some people I've known for a while. And I think that generated a lot of interest in the OPIS training this fall. We had 20 some people sign up, but as might be expected, it was impossible to find a single time slot that worked for everybody. So this was the best one that we could do. And we're recording these, so those who couldn't do this time slot can watch after the fact. Anyway, so welcome. The goal this week is just to do introductions, see what everyone's facing. Everyone, you're all from different institutions, OPIS users. We have some at R1s teaching hundreds of students at a time. We have a lot of four-year institutions with smaller classes. We have many community colleges. We have, for a while there, we had an all-female school. That person retired, but now we have an all-male school. We have an HBCU. We have rural serving. So we have people approaching this from all sorts of different backgrounds. We have people who do the labs integrated into the course. We have people who do their labs separately, but kind of in concert with what they're teaching. We have people who do their labs separately and not in concert with what they're teaching. That's what we do at UNC, Chapel Hill. So there are all sorts of different implementation modes. We have people who do every OPIS lab religiously. We have people who pick and choose between them and have a number of their own favorite labs that they continue to do. So there's no set way to implement the curriculum. There's no standard body of students. Everyone's situation is different. So I'm hoping to go around the table and get some introductions for starters and try to get a better feel for what you're facing and what your style of implementation will be, what your interest is in this kind of stuff. And then we'll do some orientation stuff, talk a little bit about how the curriculum came about, the curriculum ecosystem that we're developing at UNC. OPIS is just the first rung in a ladder to more advanced curricula, some of which are still under development. And if we have time, we'll actually start talking about the tools that we'll use in OPIS and the flow of the OPIS labs. And then in upcoming weeks, we'll 1 week at a time go through each of the labs. So does that all sound good? Okay. So let's work our way around the virtual table with introductions. And Jack, you're in my upper left, so you want to go first?
If I want to go first is what my English professor called a rhetorical question. No answer required. I am retired from Rowan Cabarrus Community College, where I started the astronomy program. During the peak years while I was there, we had the second largest astronomy program in the community college system. unable to catch up with Guilford Tech. Since I retired and another fellow took over, the attendance in astronomy is somewhat lower, but the interest is still there. I'm still an adjunct in that program as well as an online adjunct for several different community colleges. At Stanley Community College, I'm the entire physics faculty, and at Durham Tech, I'm the entire astronomy faculty. So at Rowan Cabarrus, I do whatever's handed to me, leftovers, lab here, lab there. At Durham Tech, I get to say so, and that's my primary interest here. Durham Tech is, when I first got acquainted, I commented that some of the policies and procedures were unique, and I was informed by a faculty member everything at Durham Tech is unique. Astronomy lecture and lab are taught as a single combined thing, and they get one grade for both sections. Dan, I'm sure you're familiar with that. May have seen it a couple other places.
Mm-hmm.
It's
It's
strictly online,
one
so I do online
151.
labs, many that I've written, but I'm always looking for ways to improve it. Something besides a simple simulation where you run it and fill out a form.
Uh, so this is 151, 151A.
Yeah, 151, 151A. They do not have 152 and 152A, although I have encouraged him to think about that. I think there would be some interest in it, but
There's a long story there, actually.
pardon?
There's a long story there about 152, for
Okay,
which
you can
we
fill
take.
me in on that.
Yeah, I'll tell you briefly. Um, about 10 or 15 years ago, there was an agreement between the community college system and the rest of the UNC system about what courses would transfer. And we wanted, of course, both 151 and 152 to transfer. And I was at that meeting and somehow became the de facto person in charge of the meeting. And I got every school to agree except one school would not agree on 152. It was Western Carolina. And it had to be unanimous. And so 152 didn't become part of the, I think it's called cooperative agreement. And so it wouldn't transfer. And so community colleges stopped offering it because they couldn't get enough enrollment for a course that wouldn't transfer. And for about a decade, I was blamed, even though I was there fighting the good fight. They thought I was the one who nixed it. But I recently worked with Tom English and Chris Clemens, who's provost at UNC, and got that added to the cooperating agreement. So 152 now does transfer, and so it could sustain enrollments and is beginning to be taught across the community college system in North Carolina again.
Yeah, as far as enrollment in 152, transferability is only part of the argument. If you have a good enough program, like I did when I was there, I would run two sections of 152 and have them fill up.
Yeah.
And as far as transferability, I'm not going to blame you because I was in on those meetings.
Okay.
I'm going to support what you did or tried to do for us.
Good. Yeah. Wake Tech is a big user. Edgecombe also uses the curriculum. So great. I'm glad you're here. Okay. Evan.
Yeah, hi. I'm Evan Rich, an assistant professor of practice at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, which Dan came and thankfully visited us last year and told us about the great program. So we're really excited to try it out. We are, I guess, to give context to the program, this is the lab portion. We're going to be using for the lab portion of a 200 level course, kind of trying to use it to replace some of those paper simulation labs. And complement our outdoor labs as well for those always rainy, cloudy days that we seem to get a lot of every year. So yeah, but we're very excited to try it out here.
That's great. Yeah, that's where I began. So as we go through these, I use every opportunity to plow through some of my notes so I don't have to give a long monologue at the end. But that's where I began in '08 with those outdoor labs, and it's one of the reasons that motivated us to move to these Skynet-based labs. The students just well, we had two types of labs back then. We had outdoor labs and planetarium labs. We have a great planetarium. It's the largest in the Southeast. The Apollo, Gemini, and Mercury astronauts all trained there. It's now fully digital. They removed the Zeiss. But the night labs were very unpopular. Students did not like coming at night. And often it would be rained out or clouded out or snowed out. Not that we get snow anymore, but back then we did. And the primary labs, they have their own problems, which I'll rant about in just a second. But the backup labs were even worse. It was like, here's a photo of a scan of a fax of a copy of the moon, measure a crater. They're horrible, horrible labs, the backup labs. And the primary labs, when you could go out there, it was mostly about fighting with the small telescope. And I go through this just because I know most of you teach labs of this type. This is the standard astronomy lab before robotic telescopes got involved, and still the mainstay throughout the country. And now the technology has gotten better with go-to telescopes and whatnot, but for a large part of it, it's fighting with the hardware to do these things. And we had a lot of discussions at Chapel Hill, and the philosophy we came up with was learning how to use a telescope. That's something that's an important skill for a major. Once they've actually become a major, we want them to learn that skill. But at the introductory level, we weren't as enthralled with that, and the students were not happy with it. The telescopes were hard to use. We for two reasons, not just fighting with the telescopes. We didn't want that to be their takeaway. Science is hard. It's just a bunch of stuff that doesn't work. But the things that you can do with a 3.5-inch standard telescope, it's fairly limited, and it doesn't really connect to what you're teaching in your standard survey of the universe course. And so kind of our goal behind OPIS was, well, and with the planetarium labs, although they love being in the planetarium chamber and you could do it during the day, again, it also didn't connect well with standard curricula. The things they could do is measure angles on the sky with their hand, but unlike the real sky that's at infinity, they changed their seat, their measurements could change by 100%. And so it was a problematic experience. And again, it didn't connect. So that's why we developed the Skynet-based labs. And the goal really wasn't so much, we have this cool new tool, Skynet, what can we do with it? We sat down and said, what do we teach in the Survey of the Universe course? What are the primary lessons? Can we build and design labs where they actually do those things they're learning about? And whatever the tool. And often the answer was, yes, you could do it with Skynet. But you'll see of our 9 OPIS labs, 2 of them don't even use Skynet. They're old-fashioned manual labs just because we thought that was the better way to convey the information. Anyway, I took your opening there to dump out some stuff on my list there. That's motivation for OPIS. Okay, working my way around. Oh, and you said you're using it for 200 level, and I'll talk at some point about the OPIS is an introductory curriculum. There's another curriculum that we're developing after it that's way cool called Multi-Wavelength Universe. It's a next level curriculum where we do, well, cool things. I'll save some of that. So next, I have Jay here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jay Kalanog. I am physics and astronomy faculty over here in the West Coast, San Diego Miramar College. I teach like many of you guys here, the intro level lab for this semester. And we actually already had our first meeting back in Tuesday, so our semester already started. So going to these trainings is actually part of my sabbatical project because I'm actually going to sabbatical next spring. So I'm kind of doing part of that work already. So I'm here because I'm also trying to see if OPIS would be a good fit in terms of implementation with our labs, and looking forward to just kind of learning, how some of the remote telescope components can complement, our hands-on plus our observing labs as well. Yeah, happy to be here.
Excellent. Are most of your labs in person, online?
They are all in person. We only have one section, and I made this my sabbatical project. Basically, I'm revamping all of our astronomy labs just because, let's just say if you were like a non-science major and that was your first lab, our labs are a lot of physics labs, not astronomy labs, and you would hate being you would hate science if that was your lab.
Yeah, with astronomy, we have this, and we talked about this a lot at the meeting that I mentioned before, but we have this great opportunity. You know, people call it the gateway drug to STEM. 1/10 of all college students take introductory astronomy. For many of them, it's the last science course they'll ever take. And so you want it to be a good experience. But other things we talked about at the meeting that I find interesting, and this has always been my opinion, and I thought it was a minority opinion, but like almost everyone at the meeting just automatically agreed. It wasn't even a topic of debate. And it's content doesn't matter with introductory astronomy. It doesn't matter what we teach them. They're most likely going to forget it anyway. I know that sounds terrible, right? Because you've been teaching all your life, and but a great example is the Harvard video. I'm sure most of you have seen the Harvard graduation video where they ask the Harvard students why it's hotter in summer and colder in winter, and they get it wrong. And the point of the video is, haha, look at these Harvard graduates who don't even know this. But that's not my takeaway from the video. My takeaway is these are the movers and shakers of society, them and graduates of other institutions and lead institutions. And clearly they can do just fine without understanding something as basic as the seasons. And I personally think we even though I have a whole OPIS lab on seasons, I think we over obsess because of all the things they don't understand in astronomy. This is one of thousands. And the point is they're going to forget whatever they don't use. And astronomy, they're not going to use it, but it's tantalizing and exciting. So what can we do with this opportunity? And what we've come to is you use this as an opportunity for them to experience doing science, not just sitting and learning the greatest hits the past 400 years, but doing the greatest hits the past 400 years and really gain an appreciation for what science is. And if you can, the thing is in astronomy, it's the hardest of all the disciplines. It has been the hardest to achieve because you're stuck with your 3.5-inch telescope that's not good enough to bridge that divide. Or the analyses you have to do require complicated software, like you have to use IRAF. You're not going to use IRAF with introductory students, you know. And so we've been spending a big part of the last decade building tools such that what used to be a graduate student activity that would take a week can be done by a survey level non-major in hours or tens of minutes. And that compensates. You mentioned all these physics labs that are horrible, and many of the labs and many of the disciplines are horrible, but we're trying to capture the excitement of astronomy and make it doable. And since they're going to forget the content anyway, because they don't use it, even the seasons where they might use it if they travel to the other side of the world, they really don't use it and they forget, and they default to thinking seasons are about proximity, which is to their credit. That's the first order effect. It's only tilt because our orbit's almost perfectly circular. And so the second, or if you're on a comet, seasons are about proximity to the heat source. But anyway, they forget this. And so instead, maybe they can spend their time learning what science is, and you can only learn what it is by doing it and hearing about the scientific method, and doing it in a way that's exciting. And if that's the takeaway, when they go off in the public and vote, they can vote with some understanding of, yeah, science is hard. They don't always get it right because it's hard, but it's an honest process. Anyway, let's keep going. Art, you're next.
Hi, Dan.
Hey.
Well, you pretty much said everything that I believe in. My name is Art Borja. I'm in Peoria, Arizona, and I teach in Glendale, Arizona. And I teach middle school science. And one of my goals for taking this class is to get my kids doing science and actual meaningful projects. I'm just finishing Rachel Freed's class on astrometry, and the students tomorrow I'm actually having Kevin Healy, we're collaborating on getting the students started on a project. So how cool is it to have eighth graders do actual research and get it published? So that is my lofty goal, and hopefully we'll get there. And this class is also part of what I want them to do meaningful labs. I think if you can get the spark started at this age, I think that's important. I know they're not all going to become scientists, but it is important to have scientific literacy in society, as we can all see. We need those people to become citizens that can make decisions, you know, based on their knowledge and experience. So if you have never done science, how can you make those decisions? So I totally agree with you there, Dan. Thank you.
And I'm so glad you're here because, all the research points to middle school being the place where not all, but most people fundamentally decide whether, if they're going to do science, or maybe to put it more accurately, if they're not going to do science. In middle school, they say, nope, not for me. And then there's no recovery. But if they have a good experience, STEM experience in middle school, the door's still open. Then it's up to the rest of it. Because most of us are undergrad. OPIS is an undergrad curriculum. Though, as I mentioned, we are working on ways to bring it down to the K through 12 level. And maybe that's something you'll play a role in down the road. And the rest of us are bad in cleanup. Whoever still survives that middle school hurdle, it's up to us to see if we can turn them into a STEM major. But there's very little, the research shows there's very little that you can do to bring someone back once they've made that decision. Though it happens. I've had some, total tangent, but my favorite story of that type, in my 400-seat lecture, I had a journalism major sitting in the back. And thankful Cromartie. And she loved the course so much and the OPIS labs that she came back for more, and then went to my summer program at Green Bank, which is a radio program. Loved that, became my research undergrad, became a radio astronomer, discovered, I think, 9% of all known millisecond pulsars using Green Bank telescope and Arecibo. And when Nanograv had their big announcement, on the panel, she was one of the 5 panelists. So that's total aside, but my success story of bringing someone back who had already made that decision that they're not going to do science. But anyway, next up, Lauren.
Hi, I'm
Hey.
so happy to be here. My name's Lauren Albin, and I've been hearing a lot about Skynet, so I've been wanting to jump on the train for a while. My father was teaching that curriculum at Agnes Scott College for a while, and then I recently, I'm connected to Rachel Freed through AstroSL, and I saw a bunch of awesome presentations on Skynet at the IAU General Assembly meeting. Yeah, it was great. And on the multi-wave universe stuff. So I'm like really excited.
So you met my grad student, Megan Dubay.
Yes.
Yep.
I was sitting in her sessions a lot. I didn't introduce myself. I just logged it for later. But yeah, her presentations really convinced me, like, wow, I got to sign up. I got to find out more about what this Skynet is all about. And not only that, there were so many other astronomers who were using remote telescope networks for accessibility reasons throughout the world. And also, Rachel gave a cool presentation that said using remote telescope programming actually increases, I think, the confidence of women in astronomy courses. So I was just like on a high after all that. And so I emailed you immediately. I was in South Africa and I was like, oh, can I sign up still?
Okay,
so
I'm good. You finished, but I'm taking that as a segue for one of my topics I needed to hit today. So
Oh, great. I love that. Yeah, so I'm at Young Harris College. It's not far from you, here in the Blue Ridge Mountains, really remote place, a rural Appalachian foothills. And I'm the planetarium director in the astronomy department. We don't have a major. but I teach 1105 and 1106. So it's like solar system and beyond the solar system. And I'm working in beyond the solar system this semester. And we also have a small observatory. And I do try to get students out there, but because of there's no classes that happen after 7 p.m. here. So it's always like just based on student self-election that they make it to the observatory. And I really wanted to give my students some experience and hands-on data collection with telescopes. I want to make the astronomy class really palatable and fun. Just as you were saying, it's the gateway to other STEM or STEAM initiatives and excitement around that. So yeah, that's sort of where I'm at. My class is in person, but I also teach online courses for like the early college network, which spans a lot of North Georgia. And also I teach in person at the high school occasionally. So yeah, okay. I'm also thinking about this as something that could be used for community education.
That's great. I mean, so many things I could segue off of and cross things off my to-do list for today. The online, this curriculum works both. I prefer it in person. I'd rather be in front of the students or have a TA in front of the students so they could interact. But when the pandemic hit and everyone in STEM labs panicked, how we transitioned just like this because it's online telescopes and the labs are through an online grading service and so we transitioned to online. There's only a couple manual things with no alternatives in the whole curriculum. So this works very well online, and a lot of people use it online these days. Your telescope that your students can't go to, or you can't force them to go to after 7, if it's fully remotely controllable, which probably is, at least knowing your dad, it probably is, you can put it on Skynet. Skynet is not just UNC telescopes. There are a bunch of what we call partner telescopes. And kind of my long-term vision is to reduce my hardware footprint and become more of a software enterprise, probably teaming up with some of my rivals like Las Cumbres and Photon Ranch, both of which are funded by Wayne Rosing, who, I love Wayne Rosing. And I got into robotic telescope networks in 04, he in 05. He says his biggest frustration is I got the name Skynet before he could get it. But he's former VP of Google, and I just can't compete with that kind of funding level. The TIE are coming up with a network as well, and they have the Crown Princess dumping money into that. I've raised about $20 million over my 20 years from NSF, but we can definitely beat them all at software. I can't touch them at hardware. But anyway, I wanted to mention Rachel's. So two of you've mentioned Rachel Freed now. She's the super enthusiastic personality, goes between all the various groups, but she's technically my postdoc. She's a UNC employee, has been for a couple of years. And we have these 2 large grants right now, $2 million for the OPIS curriculum, which you're all participating in. You get paid. I'll mention that a little bit later for your not a lot, but some for your participation. And we have a $3 million from the Department of Defense STEM division for developing the second curriculum. And so Rachel and her mentors, Michael Fitzgerald, David McKinnon, Australian, but some of you are nodding, these people. They're great at what they do. And to get this large money, you have to have an education research team. You can't just do it yourself. And I always thought education research, I'll just be blunt, I thought it was bullshit, right? You give a pre-survey, you give a post-survey. It's very soft science. You can make the numbers say whatever you want. That was my opinion. I didn't think very highly of it. But then I fell in with this group because I need to fall in with some group if I was going to go after the big money. And they convinced me that most of education research is bullshit, but some of it is not. These people are very good at what they do, very rigorous. You don't just make a survey and think you're doing education research. It has to go through an exploratory factor analysis, a confirmatory factor analysis, testing on lots of students, statistical tests for statistical properties before you can even use it to do research. So I've gained a lot of respect for small parts of that community, including these people. So here's the big number to come out of OPIS, since you mentioned it. What we're looking at for both of these curricula are STEM attitudes, which turn out to be the hardest thing to measure, the hardest thing to push are STEM attitudes. Self-efficacy, and this is where we knock it out of the park. That's what I'm showing you at the moment. Self-efficacy is this idea of, I can do this. And it's prerequisite. If you're going to turn someone into a STEM practitioner, they're not going to go into STEM if they don't believe they can do STEM. So it's not a sufficient condition, but it's a necessary condition. I personally think the two together, attitudes and self-efficacy, is what you need to move to turn someone into a STEM scientist, STEM practitioner. We're looking at career intention, which is what this leads to, and also learning gains. And I'll give you my little rant about learning gains. My plan is just to get through the introductions today, but to pepper stuff in as we do it. So learning gains, the education research community has been obsessed with learning gains the past decade or so, because it's the easiest thing to measure. What's the content you're teaching? Give them a test beforehand, give them a test after. It's a very easy thing to measure. And you can say, you could try different techniques like active techniques versus passive techniques, et cetera. That's been everything that's been drilled into our heads for the past decade. Active learning boosts learning gains, and learning gains are important for, in my opinion, for sequential courses. Like if they're going from physics 1 to physics 2, they better learn the stuff in physics 1 so they don't fail in physics 2. For stuff that builds, that's very important. But with introductory astronomy, I believe it's the exception. Most of those people are not going on, and like survey level astronomy. And those who do go on often have to redo stars and galaxies. Like if they become major track, there's a whole nother course on stars and galaxies they start with quite often. So I think learning gains in our particular situation matter less. And we do test and we do fine. We have moderate to large gains in learning gains. But I think people have over-focused on this and have not focused enough on self-efficacy and attitudes and career intentions. Because if they hate the experience, so supposedly they have great learning gains score, but they hated the experience, well, and they don't come back and take the second course, their learning gains were just cut in half right there because they didn't take the next course. Anyway, self-efficacy. So here's what we found. They built 2 instruments, this group, Rachel, and actually all 3 of these papers are now accepted. This is an old slide. You see Freed is the first author on all 3 of them here. And part of it was for a PhD thesis. They built 2 instruments. One is on their astronomical knowledge, self-efficacy, and one is on use of instrumentation, self-efficacy, left and right. And what those numbers are called effect sizes, but they're basically the number of standard deviations you push your student from the pre to the post. And just to calibrate your scale, 0.2 is negligible, 0.5 is moderate, 0.8 is large. If you can push your students a full standard deviation, that's consistent with what you get out of mastery learning, which is you stay on the topic until you master it. It's the infinite time approximation. You get a slope of 1. To get a slope of 2, you need to have, it's like peer tutoring, one-on-one. And we can't do that. In your smaller classes, you can get closer to it, but if I'm teaching 400, it's not possible. So the OPIS curriculum is designed, it's a mass curriculum. So we would never hope for that. And here you can see the slopes. They're between 1.26 and 2.02. And this is earlier data, but it's basically the same. So for a mass curriculum, we're getting off the chart kind of results in self-efficacy. Some institutions get into the 3s. Mine's one of them, but just bragging. I actually don't teach it. My TAs teach it. So I'm proud of my TAs. They're grad students doing their first teaching, and they're able to generate this kind of self-efficacy gain. So that is huge. But the thing I like about this the most, you see the 2 lines. The dashed line, those are the guys. The solid line, those are the girls. And at the beginning, you see there's a gap, and this is the well-known gender confidence gap in science. For whatever reason, it exists when they get into the OPIS curriculum. But you see by the end of it, it's all but gone. So that's something really excited about. And this stuff has now been published in leading, PR journal. Anyway, thanks for letting me do that segue. That was perfect. So I'll stop sharing for a moment and we'll keep moving through. Benjamin, you're next.
Okay, would you mind letting me do a share, Dan?
Oh, not a problem. Yeah, go for it.
So my name is Benjamin Mendelson. I'm the astronomy faculty at West Valley College in Saratoga, California. And what I wanted to share with you is we've just finished building a brand new planetarium, which we started teaching in right around the time COVID hit. And then we had to pivot during COVID, which is how I discovered Skynet, because I was looking for an alternative to run labs now that everything had moved online. Kind of echoing some of the sentiments that I've heard earlier, the emotional connection for our non-science majors is really what we're looking for to get them to support STEM. And we've always looked at planetariums as the, you talk about a library as being something for helping literacy. We've always looked at a planetarium as being the outreach tool for science literacy. I know Lauren would agree with me on this one, right? So due to a generous donation, we were able to, instead of renovating our old planetarium, we built a new one. I managed to put infrastructure in that I'm hoping in the future we can fill out. So the dome you see on the building is completely devoid of any instrumentation. And at some point, I hope to do some fundraising, grant money, something to instrument that. And Dan and I have briefly talked about in the past getting that observatory on Skynet once we do. So we essentially teach non-science majors astronomy classes. We've got cosmology, life in the universe. Our solar system class we call Family of the Sun. Our stellar astronomy class we call Lifestyles of the Stars. And Family of the Sun and Lifestyles of the Stars have a lab component. And in the past, I was using some resources like Observing with NASA, looking for, of course, something better, but always looking for something that didn't cost us a lot of money because we don't get a big budget here to run our program. So fortunately, during the pandemic, I got a chunk of money to pivot, bought some time on Skynet. And maybe to Dan's chagrin, I don't know. I'm still working through that initial allotment after all these years. Anyway,
it goes farther than you would think, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, partly that's because we're not using Skynet as much as I'd like to. I'm also trying to get my instructors who essentially teach one course here, one course there in my program to adopt it as well. The big problem for a part-time instructor is they don't have a lot of time, and getting them to learn something new, the investment that they would have to make, they tend to back off a little bit. But I'm trying to make it easier. I don't use the Cengage system because I am already having students on a virtual platform. I already have them on a Canvas platform, which is our learning management system. And I just don't want to add more systems for them to utilize. So what I've been doing is I go on to Cengage, look at the labs that you've developed, and I kind of rework them a little bit. And we use them, right? We do a combination of labs. Some are in the planetarium, some are robotic telescope, and then some are actually in the lab room where we do, for instance, an optical bench, spectroscopy, things like that. So that's where we're sitting. I was originally intrigued when I read one of Dan's postings about the huge retention rates, right, that you were getting when you started this curriculum. And, those are the types of things that influence me. Oh, maybe I should adopt this as well. So that's kind of how I got involved with this whole set of things.
Well, great. You just gave me a ton of segues there. So
Oh, good.
where to begin here? Well, first of all, I'm glad that you shared. This is, even though this semester will be about training on the Opus labs, which we're not even going to get to today, it's also about community building. The people who go through this program, they graduate on to our current efforts, which right now it's MWU, and there are about 30 of them that are actively involved, and they meet 2 to 3 times a week. And it's just this great sense of community. A lot of these people, a lot of you may be the only astronomer at your place. And so this is a weekly get together where we can share and brainstorm. And so sharing stuff is wonderful. So you shared a picture of, I guess that was an Astrohaven dome, I presume, and with nothing in it yet. And so I just want to mention, if any of you have a telescope, and normally we look at 14-inch and above to be worth integrating, though we do have some desire for smaller telescopes now with larger fields of view with our astrophotography curriculum. So we'll look at those as well. But the deal is, if you want to join Skynet, it doesn't cost you anything. If you can control your telescope remotely and weather station and all that, and we'll run through your equipment list with you and make sure everything's fine. You can put it on Skynet, and then Skynet will open the dome, close the dome automatically. So once you train your students, yeah, they can't be there at night, undergrads, maybe once or twice, but not every night to do a long-term project. So they have their in-person manual experience, but then they transition to, I'll just go to the web page and request this and go to sleep, and data comes back next clear night. And so the way it works is, you work with some of my engineers, put on Skynet. In the Skynet 2 system, you won't even have to work with us. You just go to the web page and it's that automated. It's going to be super cool. But right now we have to manually put you in the database. And the deal is what you're paying is 10% of the time. And with small campus observatories, mostly it sits unused anyway. So it's 10% of contested time goes to Skynet activities such as OPIS and MWU, and our director discretionary research like gravitational wave follow-up, supernova discovery. And if any professional uses your telescope, you provide a builder's list. You can have as many names as you want, but only the top 2 are ever guaranteed spots, but they get spots on the publications. So there's one segue. If you have your own telescope, campus telescope, you're welcome to put it on board. You mentioned retention rates, so I'll give you those numbers. When we rolled this out at UNC, we knew that we were onto something special because, well, a couple things. The enrollments, they went up 100% in 5 years, to the point that like 1 in 5, 1 in 6 UNC Chapel Hill students, and there are 16,000 of them total. So, 1 in 5 or 6 were taking introductory astronomy, not just the labs. Labs went up by over 100%, but the introductory astro courses went up by 100%. And this made it possible for me to request new hires. We hired 2 more people, including Nick Law, who's building the Argus array, $24 million landslide that we just got here. And also, the enrollments went up 100%, but they were coming back for secondary courses. And from those courses, we'd take them to our summer program at Green Bank, and almost all of them come back. So our AstroTrack majors went up 300%, from 10 at any one time to 40 at any one time. So there's a track record. Now, not everyone wants it. Some of them, the administration says it's one course, it's capped at this. But some places are interested in really growing enrollments. And you could do that with this curriculum, particularly if you work closely with the counselors, the first year student advising counselors. Is if they know that this course exists, it's exciting, they get good feedback from their students, you have open dialogue. So there's a marketing aspect of this as well. But with those kinds of communications and offering Opus and doing it well, you can have these results. Probably the best case was Saskatchewan in Canada. Daryl Jansen, he grew his program from 400 to 1,250, mostly on Skynet stuff like Opus. That's per year. And he's like the only one teaching. I don't understand how he does it. But anyway. And the other way we knew that we were hitting a home run is they're putting it on social media. They're putting their homework, their pictures on social media. And with Opus, it's just single shot black and white. We're not doing, there's a little intro to color imaging, but it's mostly just single shot black and white stuff because it's designed to scale to a national audience without taxing the machines. But they're putting these deep sky objects, they're one shot black and white on social media, saying things like best homework you'll ever be assigned. Not that we're stalking our students on social media, but some of these came to our attention and we knew we were doing something right at that point. Okay, let's keep going around. Kent.
Hello, I'm Kent Reinhardt. I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska with Evan also, but I teach at Southeast Community College and Nebraska Wesleyan. So both places have an astronomy class with lab. At SEC, we've integrated into the coursework, and at Wesleyan, it's a separate class. And I've been involved with Kevin Lee for over 25 years developing applets with the Nebraska Astronomy Applet Project, and always looking for something to engage students with. And then Dan came to the summit last year in October, and I saw that and said, this sounds really interesting. So within a month, kind of got things turned around and did an introductory process with the OPIS in one class to test run it. And then this semester switched over to the regular astronomy at both campuses, and really looking forward to integrating the lab portion into the class. So
Great. I remembered one more spin-off that Benjamin gave me. So let me explain how the different ways Opus can be used. So as Benjamin mentioned, he doesn't use the WebAssign product, and there are pluses and minuses to using it. A lot of people do, though a lot of people do what Ben's done. And so one approach that you can take is you can purchase telescope time from University of North Carolina. They sell it as a contract. We don't yet have like a swipe a credit card system thing for it, but it's a contract. Takes a couple of weeks to process, but it's kind of a pre-approved contract with UNC Legal. And it sells for $75 an hour, minimum contract's 10 hours. And you have as long, the contract says after 2 years, you could lose your credits, but I'd never take them away. It's just in there in case I ever decide to do something else, which is not my plan. It's just an escape hatch if I ever need it. Some people do that. And particularly, we're working with elite educators, and some of them want to do their own thing. And I totally understand. I want to do my own thing. That's why I designed Opus. And so that's one pathway. Though most people use the WebAssign product. WebAssign is at the time in 2008, 2009, they were leagues ahead of everything else in terms of homework assessment, auto grading, and whatnot. The platform hasn't evolved too much, though it was bought by Cengage Learning, which is the second largest textbook distributor. And so they are making improvements, particularly with LMS integration. So, so if any of you need to integrate it with your LMS, I can hook you up with the right people. And technically, they own the product, and the way the finances work there is they charge $65. It's a textbook. It's an online textbook. Some of that money comes back to Skynet to pay for the telescope time. So those are the two fiscal models. One advantage is I'm always making little tweaks and updates to the curriculum. And so if you're doing your own thing, but pulling from Opus, you have to, sometimes it's hard to find the changes and whatnot. So if you're on the WebAssign system, you get the updates automatically. But if you want to do your own thing, totally understood. So there are those two pathways right now. Okay. I wish I could just make it free, but as I mentioned before, I'm not former VP of Google. It costs about $400,000 a year to run Skynet. We're a fairly bare bones system. And so the telescope time has to be paid for. And we ran this model by NSF, they want sustainability models. They're tired of funding people, give them $1 million to make this amazing curriculum that then disappears the year after the funding stops. We've been here since 2008, and I have a staff that runs around the world and maintains the telescopes. And so that's what the money's going for. Okay, next. Let me hide the chat. So, Abbas, you're next.
Hello, everyone. I'm very glad to be here. Also, thank you, Dan, for the support. Is actually, I met with you on the Astro Ethnic Onke on the last few months, and also based on the other colleagues that I had on that sense, was one of the excellent programs that about astronomy we attend, and also I touch base with you to further employment of that learnings on the societies. Actually, I'm professionally working as an engineer, but astronomy is my hobby, and always since my teenager times, I was involved on many of the activities for education, and also mostly observational astronomy, stargazing respect. But in the last few years, I had opportunity to contact with many of my friends on the schools, libraries and parks and recreation center near the south western North Carolina, and I had a very good interest. I didn't expect that have reached to that kind of sense that we needed to we can do more work in the community and also between the students, and not as a kind of formal educational center, but informal. And also I had received in last few weeks several requests for at least once a week sessions for the learning astronomy, and also I believe the tools that you provide, it provide a kind of a medium that can connect with, although you mentioned that about the technical hardship, and you heard most of the time they will say this is the rocket science, we cannot learn from that, but always I will try to teach, make it my presentation, and always I receive a kind of very enthusiastic feedback from the community and the students and also learners and also myself, and we all together discovering ourselves that we can do more to enhance astronomy on the more public manner. But my plan is that basically to engage with one or two of the schools here. Most of the time I will teach on the elementary and preschool ages, but I had same enthusiastic I will always receive during the presentation. But my idea for this one, but I think is not appropriate for the elementary, to advance it to the middle and also higher school and also public in any ages. They can they show me many of individuals in last few months, they are interested and they want to participate on these activities, and I want to develop that kind of activities with your help. And also Skynet, as I mentioned to you, is one of the very exciting moment, although I was not involved in that, but I think it's going to be one of the great tools and OPIS as well to this endeavor.
Wonderful. And so lots of overlap with art there, of course.
Yes, that's right. But you know, this as I see it on the both from STEM or STEAM, we call it art also included. I will see more individual excited to come and present and also learn and also transfer the knowledge to each other.
Excellent. Okay, let's get Chris. We have 5 minutes, and you put a message in the chat. You have to go promptly at 4, and I will try to always close these at 4. So you're up, Chris.
Thanks, Dan. My name's Chris Rowe. I'm actually just up the road from Dan in Greensboro, North Carolina. I come from a slightly different perspective. I'm more interested in community in the informal type education. Wear a couple of different hats. I volunteer at the observatory at GTCC on public nights with Tom English as a host there, and I'm also president of the astronomy club in Greensboro. And I had the privilege of attending the dance conference this summer also, like a boss and a few other people. And I'm also a Rachel alum now, or almost a Rachel alum. I've signed up for a workshop. So to those of you out there, I see on Wednesday nights, hi. And I also joined the Solar System Ambassador program earlier this year. So, like I said, several different hats, all with the same idea, which is I'm trying to build out ways to work with the general public. And so we talk about, it was mentioned before that, the astronomy being the STEM class of choice, maybe, and for college students, but it's the last college class that they take, in STEM for a lot of students. But we also talked in the summer about, we're all lifelong learners. We learn everything. We're all learning every day, and people come to this interest. I've always loved astronomy. I did not have the privilege or didn't, take it on as a major in college. Thank you, calculus. But anyway, but I've enjoyed, reaching out to people and enjoy working with the public, enjoy talking to kids, and that kind of thing. So I'm really just trying to kind of find, more ways to engage the public. The traditional methods may or may not work, and also, develop, ongoing network of similar people, peers that can help with, those ideas. And it's kind of funny because already like I said, there's been three things here. This class, the Rachel's class, and the conference this summer, right there. There's several of us all right, in the same and Solar System Ambassador. So that idea that's working. So I have worked on Skynet just a little bit through Tom's observational astronomy class at GTCC. Not extensively, but got the idea. So that's where I am.
Wonderful. Thank you.
But I wrote down some thoughts. One other thought is on the, educating the public and reaching out to the public. One thought is, inspiring. We talk about adult learners, people that want to learn something as adults, but also those adults then influence children, right?
Mhm.
So parents, grandparents, they convey their enthusiasm and their interest to the kids and help transfer that. So that's an important part of what I'm thinking about.
Great. You mentioned a number of things that would also serve as segues, but I'm out of time. So in our last few seconds, two things, I guess. In the chat, I put a link to this spreadsheet. I ask that you go in and fill it out right now, so I don't have to keep spamming my 100 people about updates for our meeting. And so name, institution, email, whether you're instructor or TA. Do you already have a Skynet account? Are you teaching OPIS this semester? If you're not teaching OPIS this semester, I'll work with you to get a WebAssign instructor account, and I'll add you to one of my courses so you can have access to the lab, same as everyone else. If you don't have a Skynet account, I'll take care of that before we meet again. I guess the share is not, let me fix the share. No, anyone with the link can edit. Did not work? I'll put it in the chat again. Here we go, chat.
I don't see the link actually.
Oh, it went as a direct message. 1 second.
Oh yeah, you sent it.
Yeah,
Send it to me.
someone direct me. So I can't look at I'm terrible at looking at the chat during the meeting. And so I miss your direct messages to me and everything. So I apologize. Yeah, if you can stick that stuff in there, because I'll email summaries and links. We still have a little bit more orientation to go, so things to look forward to next time. I'll probably start with this diagram and explain our curricular, our education ecosystem. And as we go along, you'll learn the components of Skynet and Afterglow and Astromancer, our toolkit. OPIS, I'll tell you a few things about MWU and future plans, but then we'll jump into an overview of the OPIS curriculum and begin, but not finish Lab 1. That's the plan for next time. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to stick around, but it's 4 o'clock. So once you fill your information in there, you're free to go. And first meeting down, but I can tell this is gonna be, you're all gonna be great to work with and great additions to our community. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
And Brad, we'll get you next time. You got in at the end. We'll get your intro next time. And you're muted, so I can't, if you're talking to me, I can't hear you.
Oh, I was just saying I blindly copied down the time from the email into my calendar and I forgot about that whole time zone thing.
Yeah.
And
It's amazing.
exactly an hour late.
Yeah, it's amazing how astronomers can mess up the time zone thing.
Yep.
I was talking, my grad student and some of my team went to the IU in South Africa, and I was talking with them, and it's like, so what, is it lunchtime? And they're like, no, it's 11 p.m. And yeah, so we'll get your intro next time, and if anyone else shows up, then we'll jump into those other things. Anyone have any questions? Okay, if not, I'll see you later.
Oh, no, Dan, one question.
Yeah. Okay,
So you
sure.
sent us the links for the surveys, and I know I'm not specifically using the out of the box OPIS curriculum.
Right.
You still want us to try and encourage our students to
No,
do that, or no?
actually, for the survey design, it has to be the same
Okay.
website product, so it's an apples to apples comparison.
Got it. Okay, good to
Yeah.
know. Don't want to feed you some erroneous
Yeah.
Do you, so kind of going off of that question, because we're using most of the labs, we'll have our own labs. Is there any distinguishing you want us to tell the students? For
No,
helpful?
so you're welcome to use subsets of OPIS to mix and match. All that we will do is at the end, we'll document which labs you did, how many students did each lab, and that gets factored into the processing of the survey results.
Got it. Okay.
Thanks, Dan. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Thanks for coming.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
See ya.